Most countries rely on borders, roads, and infrastructure to function. Mongolia does not. Here, entire regions operate without fixed routes, permanent settlements, or clear boundaries. You can travel for hours without passing a town, a fence, or even a road. And yet, the country works. To understand Mongolia, you have to stop thinking in terms of structure and start thinking in terms of space, where distance loses meaning. From above, Mongolia looks empty, but emptiness here is misleading. This is the Mongolian steppe. Here's the first shock. There are no natural stopping points. The land doesn't tell you where to slow down or turn back. Horizon replaces signage. Movement depends on judgment, not direction. Distance isn't measured in kilometers. It's measured in endurance. The grasslands roll forward without interruption. No hills break the pattern. No valleys offer shelter. No forests mark transition. What you see in one direction mirrors what exists behind you. The sameness isn't monotonous. It's absolute. Navigation becomes internal. You stop relying on landmarks. You start relying on instinct. Here's what travelers don't expect. That initial impression never fades. Hours later, the view remains unchanged. The brain struggles to register progress. You move, but the landscape appears static. When roads stop existing, leave the main routes and something unusual happens. The road simply disappears. In Mongolia, many journeys don't follow paths. They follow possibility. Tracks appear and fade. Multiple routes exist at once. None are permanent. Here's what feels unsettling. There's no guarantee the way you came in will exist on the way out. The land doesn't preserve access. It allows it temporarily. Tire marks crisscross the terrain. Some are fresh. Others have faded into the grass. Drivers choose their own line. If the ground is wet, they shift left. If the surface is damaged, they move right. By the next season, the pattern shifts again. Here's the deeper truth. Mongolia doesn't need permanent roads because the land itself is the road. The entire surface is navigable. Restrictions don't exist. The steppe doesn't block movement. It permits it everywhere. That freedom feels disorienting at first. Without a defined path, decisions become constant. Which direction feels stable? Which ground looks firm? Which angle avoids the worst terrain? These aren't questions roads answer. They're questions travelers answer for themselves. Then the terrain hardens, where the land refuses comfort. Southern Mongolia is dominated by the Gobi Desert. This isn't a desert of endless sand. It's rock, wind, temperature swings that punish mistakes. Here's the shock. This desert isn't empty because it's lifeless. It's empty because it's unforgiving. Movement requires planning. Stillness carries risk. Shelter is never assumed. The Gobi doesn't conform to desert expectations. Sand exists, but it's scattered. Most of the surface is hard ground. Gravel stretches for kilometers. Rocky plateaus rise without warning. The texture changes abruptly. Smooth ground gives way to jagged stone. Flat expanses suddenly buckle into ridges. There's no pattern to predict what comes next. Temperature extremes define daily life here. Summer days exceed 40 degrees Celsius. Winter nights drop below -40 degrees Celsius. The same location experiences both. That range isn't annual. It's seasonal. The land doesn't moderate itself. It swings between opposites. Here's what makes the Gobi particularly unnerving. It punishes assumptions. Experience from other deserts doesn't fully apply. The cold is unexpected. The hardness of the ground is jarring. The absence of dunes feels wrong. This desert doesn't behave like the concept of desert. It functions on its own terms. If you're interested in places where the land controls movement and modern systems don't always apply, subscribe. This channel explores destinations shaped by conditions, not convenience. Stakes reset. Why this matters. Because in Mongolia, if systems fail, there's often nothing nearby to replace them. Distance isn't dramatic here, it's decisive. Help doesn't arrive quickly. Infrastructure doesn't extend everywhere. Self-reliance isn't optional, where the land rises without warning. In the west, the ground suddenly lifts. This is the Altai Mountains. Here's what feels wrong. The mountains appear abruptly. No gradual foothills, no easing transition. Flat land gives way to sharp elevation. Weather changes instantly. Routes narrow without notice. The land doesn't announce difficulty, it introduces it. The Altai Range stretches across borders. Mongolia shares these peaks with Russia, China, and Kazakhstan. But here, the mountains feel more remote. Towns are sparse. Roads are minimal. Infrastructure thins rapidly. The mountains don't accommodate visitors. They tolerate them. Elevation gain happens quickly. Passes rise steeply. Valleys cut deep without warning. The terrain doesn't guide, it challenges. Weather in the Altai is unpredictable. Storms form rapidly. Snow can fall even in summer at higher elevations. Visibility drops without warning. What begins as clear sky can turn hostile within an hour. Here's the pattern travelers notice. The mountains don't provide safe zones. Access requires preparation. Movement demands caution. Mistakes compound quickly. Where history is left exposed. In central Mongolia lies the Orkhon Valley. This region once supported empires. Here's the shock. There are few barriers separating past from present. No dense preservation zones. No heavy framing. History isn't enclosed. It's spread across open land. The environment doesn't protect memory. It leaves it visible. Ancient stone monuments stand without fencing. Some lean slightly eroded by wind. Others remain upright, exactly where they were placed centuries ago. There are no explanatory plaques nearby, no visitor centers offering context. The artifacts simply exist. The Orkhon Valley was once the center of empires. The Turkic Khaganate ruled from here. Later, the Mongol Empire expanded outward from these plains. Karakorum, the capital established by Genghis Khan's successors, sat near this valley. What remains now is fragments, foundations of buildings, outlines of walls, stones arranged in patterns that once held meaning. The land hasn't been developed around these sites. No modern construction encroaches. Grass grows between the ruins. Livestock graze near ancient stones. Gur camps sit within sight of historical markers. Past and present occupy the same space without separation. Here's what feels unusual. When a city breaks the pattern, then Mongolia compresses suddenly. This is Ulaanbaatar. After so much openness, the density feels abrupt. Here's the contrast. Movement tightens, space contracts, systems finally appear. The city doesn't gradually emerge, it interrupts the landscape. Urban life here feels less like expansion and more like exception. Ulaanbaatar holds nearly half of Mongolia's population. Over 1.6 million people concentrate in a single valley. The city sprawls, but it doesn't extend far. Mountains surround the basin. Growth pushes against natural limits. After hours of seeing nothing, the city's density is jarring. Buildings cluster tightly. Traffic fills the streets. Infrastructure finally becomes visible. But the transition is sharp. Drive out of the city, and within minutes, the steppe returns. There's no suburban sprawl, no gradual thinning of development. The city ends, and the land resumes. That contrast defines Ulaanbaatar. It exists as an exception, not a model. The rest of Mongolia doesn't resemble it. The systems that function here don't extend elsewhere. The city works because it's stationary. The rest of the country works because it isn't. Why Mongolia feels unsettling. Mongolia doesn't guide movement. It allows it. No fences define space. No roads insist on direction. No structures promise support. The land doesn't adapt to people. People adapt to the land. That absence of control is what feels unfamiliar. Most travelers arrive expecting some level of mediation, signs that indicate distance, roads that suggest routes, buildings that offer refuge. Mongolia provides none of these by default. The responsibility for navigation shifts entirely. You decide when to stop. You determine if the ground is safe. You assess whether conditions allow progress. The land doesn't confirm your choices. It simply responds to them. That dynamic feels exposing. That level of engagement is exhausting at first, but it's also clarifying. You become aware of the land's actual conditions. You notice wind direction. You track the sun's position. You read the terrain for clues about water, shelter, firmness. The skills most modern travel has erased become necessary again. Mongolia isn't empty. Here, control was never guaranteed. Space was. The freedom Mongolia offers isn't recreational. It's structural. The land doesn't prevent development. It simply doesn't require it. For centuries, people have moved across this terrain without altering it permanently. They followed water. They tracked seasons. They adapted to conditions rather than reshaping them. In places where mobility is constant, permanent infrastructure becomes irrelevant. In places where space is abundant, restrictions become unnecessary. Mongolia works because it never needed to work like other places. If this video changed how you think about Mongolia, subscribe, because some of the most revealing places to visit aren't built around structure. They're built around freedom.